Week 15 of the fantasy football season, and here's quarterback starts, sits every matchup this week. The first one, San Francisco 49ers at the Seattle Seahawks. So right here, Brock Purdy, he's looked good so far in the early going, but he's still not a guy I could count on 100% to put in my starting lineup in 10-team, 12-team leagues. Here's Brock Purdy. It's a good matchup versus the Seahawks. We know their defense really hasn't been good, but now without Deebo Samuel in the starting lineup, and he's going to miss a few weeks here. That's a huge weapon, obviously, missing for this San Francisco 49ers team. So this week, Brock Purdy I have as a sit. Geno Smith, he's been great this season, and a guy's really come out of nowhere after being a backup quarterback for the last 5-10 seasons, is bouncing around the league as Geno Smith. But this year, he's taken the starting role and ran with it with this Seattle Seahawks team, and he's easily getting 23-plus fantasy points a week. So this week here, even in a tough matchup versus the division rival, the San Francisco 49ers, I think I could run Geno Smith out there and at least get 20-25 fantasy points. Now to the Colts at the Minnesota Vikings. Matt Ryan this season's been a human crash test dummy with a bad offensive line and a guy who's not mobile anymore, obviously, up there in age at 37 years old. And also his receivers really haven't gotten the job done this season. Michael Pittman has been a bust. Alec Pierce, he's been up and down for a rookie, what you expect. And Paris Campbell's had a couple decent games. But right now, with not much going on for Matt Ryan this season, and he's also been a turnover machine on top of it, he's an easy sit. And Kirk Cousins, he's a start for me. And last week, a monster ball game for Captain Kirk, 425 pass yards and 2 touchdowns. So this week here, back home Minnesota, tough loss last week versus division rival, the Detroit Lions. I think Cousins has another good ball game. I'm not going to say he's going to go over 400 yards, but I think 250 to 300 with a couple touchdowns is definitely doable. Now to the Ravens at the Cleveland Browns. Lamar Jackson, he didn't practice so far early in the week here, but if he plays, obviously he's going to be a start for me in this game. This Brown defense really don't stop anyone, and Lamar, he's due to have a big ball game if he does play. And if he doesn't play, Tyler Huntley hopefully got hit around in last week's ball game. But like I said, with that running ability, Tyler Huntley could easily get fantasy owners anywhere from 5 to 10 fantasy points weekly running the football. Him and Demarcus Robinson are on the same page. I know Mark Andrews, he had a bad ball game under 4 fantasy points in last week's battle, but right now I think Tyler Huntley could be a quarterback that can help fantasy owners, even though most fantasy owners who made the playoffs, they got the top quarterbacks, obviously. But if you're in a pinch or a deeper league, I would have Huntley as a start versus a mediocre Brown defense. Now that Deshaun Watson, so far, he's got to get the rust off over there for this Cleveland Brown team. And this Raven team, they're riled up and ready to go in one of the better defensive units over the last few weeks here. I know the secondary's been leaky at times, but Deshaun Watson, he hasn't looked that great so far in the early going. I know last week it was a little bit better of a ball game here for him, but he's still rusty, and he's still a guy I can't trust in the first week of the playoffs, so he's a sit for me, is Deshaun Watson. Now to the Miami Dolphins at the Buffalo Bills. Tua last week in a plus matchup versus the Los Angeles Chargers. He fell short for sure in that one with only 12 fantasy points. But this week here, if they want to win this ball game, is this Dolphin team, after a tough loss to the Chargers, they got to come out gunning. And Tua, you think he would be, and Tyreek Hill will get going with that deep ball. So right here, big ball game on Saturday Night Football. I think Tua bounces back, even though this Bill defense is tough. Like I said, Tua's pretty much only had 1 or 2 bad games the whole season. And after coming off a bad fantasy day, I think he bounces back versus a tough Bill defense and is a start this week. And Josh Allen, he's matchup proof. I know he hasn't been 100% over the last few weeks here. It's Josh Allen, obviously with the elbow injury and stuff, but he's a guy that's going to go out there, and you drafted him early in your draft for a reason, and you start him up. Now to the Dallas Cowboys at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Dak Prescott, he's a borderline option for me this week here. Over the last couple weeks, he just hasn't looked good. He's thrown a lot of interceptions. I feel like he's forcing the football to too many spots on the field here as Dak Prescott, and he's definitely a guy that has taken a step back, I believe, in the last couple seasons here as Dak. I know this Cowboy team's going to make the playoffs, but I think it's more the running game and the defense more than anything than Prescott going out there being consistent and having great games. So on the road here, even though I know it's not a great Jacksonville team, he's a borderline option at best, is Prescott. And now to Trevor Lawrence. Lawrence, yes, he's been a decent quarterback this season. And over the last few weeks, he's definitely come on strong as a top 10 quarterback, is Trevor Lawrence. But this week, a very tough matchup versus one of the best defenses in the league this season in the Dallas Cowboys. And this Cowboy team, they almost lost to the Houston Texans. I think they're going to come out and play with more pride on defense this week here and have a good ball game versus Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars. And I got him as a sit out to the Philadelphia Eagles at the Chicago Bears. Pretty straightforward here. Jalen Hurts might win the MVP this season. Top 3 fantasy quarterback each and every week. And this week here at Chicago, he's going to roll once again at least 25 fantasy points. Now to Justin Fields. This guy's almost in a must-start conversation pretty much weekly with his running ability. This guy could go off any game for 150 yards rushing on the ground as Fields. I know he's not a great thrower of the football, but over the last 2 months here, they've really building the offense around Justin Fields to his strengths, and it's obviously shown in his numbers. So this week, even versus a tough defense like the Eagles, I know Fields is going to be running a lot. He's going to look to make plays, something out of nothing, and this week I think it happens. Now to the Atlanta Falcons. At the New Orleans Saints, Desmond Ridder getting his first career NFL start here. I'm not going to trust him in this situation. I actually think the Saints are a good start if you got their DST in fantasy football. So right here, Desmond Ridder's a sit. Andy Dalton, I know it's a good matchup on paper versus the Atlanta Falcons, but I can't trust Andy Dalton in a ball game. There's better streaming options than him if you lost to Kyler Murray or if you're a Lamar Jackson owner. And obviously, he might not play. Once again, he's definitely 2 guys here that I'm not going to start, and definite sits, obviously, with Andy Dalton and Desmond Ridder. Now to the Lions at the New York Jets. Jared Goff this season on the road, it hasn't been good. At home, he's been one of the better quarterbacks in all of fantasy land here, Jared Goff. But this week here on the road, tough defense, probably going to be a cold ball game and possible snow at MetLife Stadium. I got Jared Goff as a borderline option. I know a few teams in my leagues have rolled with him as the starting quarterback, and they've actually made the playoffs, and they're going to play him this week. But this week here, I'll be weary of him. Like I said, it's on the road. Home road splits, you can look that up for yourself and just tell this whole Lion offense is different at home indoors than they are on the road. And Jared Goff this week, I think only 15, 20 fantasy points. Tops he's going to get, he's borderline. And Mike White, I like the matchup. The Lions give up the most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season, and this line secondary can't stop anyone. This Jet offense has definitely been more dynamic since Mike White has stepped into the starting lineup. And this week here, I like him with a bounce-back game. I know he hurt the ribs versus the Bills, but right here versus this defense, he's going to make some plays, and he's a solid guy to start this week here. Steelers at the Carolina Panthers. Trubisky might be starting. Kenny Pickett in concussion protocol, but it's an easy one for me. You can't trust these guys in a big situation unless you're in a 2-quarterback league, 12-team 2-quarterback league or something, and you got no choice. But right here, Kenny Pickett, he's been up and down in his rookie year. Mitchell Trubisky, you know what you're going to get from him. Inconsistent play and really not good play at all, so he's a sit. And now to Sam Darnold. The Panthers have actually won the last 2 ball games since Sam Darnold's been back in the lineup. And yes, he was a guy recommended to add on the wire this week if you needed a quarterback in deeper leagues. But this week here, versus a pretty stout Pittsburgh Steelers defense that makes you earn it, I'm not going to start Sam Darnold. Even though the Panthers are playing better, it doesn't mean he's a guy I'm going to go out there and have confidence in starting. Now to the Chiefs and Texans. Patrick Mahomes, another magical season. Tyreek Hill gone, no problem. Still putting up the points. Still tops, I believe, of fantasy points as well, a quarterback position. So right here, he's a start. Davis Mills, he's a sit. Him and Jeff Driscoll last week was sharing snaps in the backfield behind center for the Houston Texan team. So right now, with Driscoll playing a factor in a ball game versus one of the best teams in the league like the Kansas City Chiefs, it spells a disaster, in my opinion, this week for Davis Mills. And he's a sit. Now to the Patriots at the Vegas Raiders. Mac Jones, he's a borderline option. The only reason I have him as a guy that's borderline, because it's a good matchup on paper versus a Raider defense that doesn't stop anyone. And Mac Jones, we know, at least has a couple weapons. Hopefully Stevenson's back and he plays in this game. Jacoby Myers, he was out last week as well. Maybe he could play in this ball game. And Hunter Henry's been a decent tight end this season. But anyway, even with all those factors that possibly could go right for Mac Jones and the Patriots, I got him as a borderline option. Too inconsistent, some monster games over the last few years, and then some games where it's been ugly, but they pull it out. But anyway, Mac Jones is borderline, and Derek Carr versus a Patriot defense that just ripped apart this Arizona Cardinal offense, even though I know there was no, obviously, Kyler Murray after getting hurt in the third play of the game. But just like I said here, Derek Carr you can't trust. Some big games he's going to have, and then some games he's going to put in stinkers where he only has 3 or 4 fantasy points. And we've seen it a couple times this year. So versus a tough New England defense, and they're hungry, obviously, to make a playoff spot, I got him as a sit this week here. Now to the Cardinals at the Denver Broncos. So right here, Colt McCoy's a sit. I know he can run the offense pretty smoothly, and he knows the offense. He's got good weapons in Hopkins and Hollywood Brown. But in a big playoff situation here, there's no way I'm going to go with Colt McCoy. He's a sit. And Brett Rypien, it looks like he's going to be the starter this week here for the Denver Broncos, after Russell Wilson probably had the best game of his Bronco career and taking a hard header onto the turf. So Brett Rypien, I know he's got some weapons with Judy, who came off 3 touchdowns, Cortland Sutton, who's possible for this ball game to return, and then obviously Greg Dulcich's been decent. But anyway, he's a sit as Rypien. I got to see something out of him before I'm going to go out there on the wire and to put him in the lineup. Now to the Titans at the Chargers, Ryan Tannehill. He's been a serviceable quarterback over the last few months here, but I feel like in big situations, he just never comes up. And this is a road game here for the Tennessee Titans, which always is not a good thing, even though they did just get blown out at home by the Jaguars. But anyway, Ryan Tannehill, I can't trust him. Right now, his number 1 and 2 receivers are Westbrook Hakeem, obviously, and Robert Woods, if Traylon Burks doesn't come off concussion protocol. And it's just not a good thing here for Tannehill. Now to the Chargers, Justin Herbert. What can I say? Mike Williams is back. Keenan Allen's been back over the last few weeks. And then you got Austin Eckler out of the backfield and Everett at tight end. This is a great offense here. And Justin Herbert's a must-start each and every week now to the Bucs at the Cincinnati Bengals. And surprisingly, I'm going to have Tom Brady as a start this week here. I know it was a horrible game last week, but I just feel like this Tampa Bay team and Tom Brady are due to explode, and this could be the ball game. This Bengal defense isn't all that great. Tom Brady, last game going to San Francisco, was just a buzzsaw versus a great defense here, and they shut him down, obviously. And Brock Purdy had hunger, but this week here at Cincinnati, would have less pressure, would have less eyes on him, and I think he comes through with a patented Brady type of game. And I got him as a start. Now to Joe Burrow, he's been a top 2 season here, and I know it's not the greatest of matchups versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but he's just a big-time quarterback. We saw last season lead his team to the Super Bowl. I know they fell short, and even this year, Joe Burrow is up there in all the categories. Passing yards, passing touchdowns. He's right there with the league leaders, so you start him each and every week. Now to the Giants at the Commanders. We saw this ball game 2 weeks ago, a 20-20 tie, which obviously I don't like ties in football. Most people don't let there be a winner, but anyway, they meet again here Sunday Night Football, and both quarterbacks I have his hits this week. Daniel Jones, he'll have his games where he rushes for 60, 70 yards and a touchdown, but those games have been few and far in between. I don't think he's going to get the job done versus the Commanders, even though he came off a decent performance, over 20 fantasy points last week versus the Eagles. I just think this one's going to be a tight ball game contested, and to me it wouldn't surprise if this one possibly could end in a tie for all we know versus division rivals. Now to Taylor Heineke, when he came in as a starter, he was putting up fantasy numbers, but now he's been a little bit more conservative and a game manager, which is absolutely fine here, in my opinion. But Taylor Heineke, he's not going to find nothing in this ball game to make me believe he's a starting quarterback. And right now, I have him as a sit in the final game of the week, Monday Night Football, Los Angeles Rams at the Packers. Baker Mayfield had that magical comeback 98 yards to win the ball game. He was indoors. That was versus a weak-rated defense. And this week here, a pretty stout Green Bay Packer defense is coming to town here. So anyway, Baker Mayfield's not going to get the job done. He's a sit in this one with the Packers playing good. And Aaron Rodgers, to be honest, he's been pretty much only 20, 22 fantasy points at most this season here. So right now, Aaron Rodgers, I don't think has another big game in this one. This Ram defense, they still come out and play with pride. We saw last week. Them just not roll over and give up in a ball game where it easily could have been over quick. But anyway, Aaron Rodgers is a borderline option. I think this defense will do enough to frustrate him early on. and he's a quarterback that's borderline. So that 15 quarterback start sits of every matchup of the fantasy football season.